Okay, well, we are ready to start because we have much to discuss. So let me go ahead and start. So I'm Valerie Taylor, and I am the CEO and president of Commandit, and I'm also the division director of the Mathematics and Computer Science Division at Argonne National Laboratory. And I am happy to be here for our November webinar, our Community Select webinar. And so today we'll be talking about the leadership journey of someone who is well known, especially in the field of AI. And so that is Dr. Charles Isbell Jr., who is the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the University of Wisconsin Madison. He took on that position just last year in July 2023. And Dr. Isbell is also the co-PI on the NSF BPC Alliance, the LEAP Alliance. And his research is focused on machine learning and AI. And so we're really happy to have you here, Dr. Isbell, and to hear about your leadership journey. And then to actually serve as the moderator, we have Daniel Zamora, who is a LEAP Fellow at the University of Washington. Glad to have you here. His research is in the area of HCI with a focus on robotics, fabrication, and accessibility. And so Daniel is a member of the Makeability Lab and advised by Dr. Jan Froelich. Hopefully I said that correctly. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to lead the discussion, and I'm going off screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm super honored to have this conversation with Dr. Isbell. As Valerie said, I'm a PhD student at the other UW University. And so I'm really excited to learn about his journey through academia and through leadership. And Dr. Isbell, I think I just want to start the conversation by getting to know you a little bit more in respect to your research and the work that you do. So can you please elaborate more on the details of your work?
Sure, happy to do it. And so first off, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. If I don't answer the question you want, just ask me another question, push me in the right direction, and maybe I'll answer that one. Let me just start off by saying that you're UW and we're UW, which is a thing that I got drilled into my head when I showed up here a year or so ago. We can talk about that a little bit later, and I'm very happy to have a chance to talk with you and to talk to everyone here. So research, let's start with that. So I do machine learning and AI. I have been working in that field in one way or another for well over 30 years. I think of what I do as being interactive machine learning. So this is a space where you build systems, you do all the math, the engineering, the science, the computing of building systems that interact with other intelligent systems, dozens of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, some of whom may also be human. So what you do there is you try to think about what does it mean to model human behavior? What does it mean to predict human behavior? What does it mean to intervene and impact human behavior? And you treat that as the kind of central question for machine learning systems on the one hand, but also the things that we know about human behavior, use those as models for how you might learn in machine learning systems and to train them. Because somehow we, as people, do the same sorts of things we're asking our systems to do, and we do it despite having all the same limitations and perhaps seeing a lot less data, having a lot less sort of access to compute, as it were, but we manage to do it. And we do it because we have a lot of strong built-in assumptions. We collaborate and work with other intelligent beings and drawing those things out so that we can build faster systems that are more efficient in the way that they learn is sort of the central question of my research and my work.
Great. I mean, I know you've been in the field for a long time, so it's I'm sure you have a lot of interesting takes in seeing AI come to the forefront of like public discourse as well. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the work you've done on the other side. I know you've put a lot of effort into computing education and thinking about how we can really educate younger generations. So I think that's going to tie into our discussion later of like how you've taken this journey through leadership. But can you talk a little bit more about the work you've done on that side as well?
Oh yeah, happy to do it. So I think the first thing that's worth saying is, I'm an academic. I care very much about research. Just talked a little bit about it. It's sort of central to what I do and why I do the things that I do. But I think equally as important, at least for me, is thinking about education, thinking about access, thinking about what does it mean to bring people into this world. And I think that we should put as much energy into that part of it as we do in figuring out how to more quickly do the inverse of a matrix so that I can do some kind of machine learning thing. That really matters. And it's one of the reasons why I'm at a university instead of somewhere else, because this is a place where you can take that, love for inquiry on the one hand and marry it with a love for education and bringing people into the ongoing conversation that you have. It is sort of the core animating thing for why I do what I do and why I've taken the particular path that I've taken. On that education side, very early in my career, I started thinking about what would it mean to do undergraduate education in computing in a way that would be broadly available to many people. So this was at a time, it's hard to imagine this now, but there was a time when people were worried that not only were there not going to be enough computer scientists to match the demand, no one actually wanted to be a computer scientist. People were worried, oh, everyone's fleeing the field. We have no way of getting enough people into the major. Things are going to be shutting down. Like that was a thing that people actually worried about a quarter of a century ago. It's turned out not to be the case. But we put a lot of time and energy around then people sort of asking the question, what does it mean to create something that is ready for the 21st century rather than being stuck, if I can use that term, in the 20th century? What does it mean to be computing? And a lot of that begins with education, with thinking about how do you make something available for everyone, whether they're going to be a computationalist, do machine learning, or do something else, and how do you bring in people who may not see themselves in the field so that they're a part of the conversation. So I put a lot of time and energy into rebooting and rethinking our undergraduate education at Georgia Tech, which is where I was at the time, and later in thinking about how to expand that and connect to people who were not going to be able to come on campus. So I was a part of the co-creators of the online Master of Science, Computer Science at Georgia Tech, which is a master's program, top 10 graduate program in the country in CS. And it went from 0 students to about 12,000 students each semester, cost a degree $6,600 for the entire degree, and tried to make that available. And it's a program that I think in many ways has been quite successful and brings in people who could clearly do great work, but didn't have the access or the means to do it.
And I think that was like pretty early on, right? At the time when like these kind of massive online courses were coming into the front. So that was
Yeah.
like one of the first programs that I've heard do something like that.
I think you could argue it was easily the first of its kind.
Yeah.
Certainly at an elite research university.
Yeah, I mean, I think that reflects one bold choice. I'm sure there's going to be many that we talk about through this journey, but we can jump into kind of the core of this webinar, which is really about your journey to and through leadership positions. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about what motivated you to take on leadership roles, especially as a researcher, as an academic, such as being executive associate dean, and now even your current position as provost. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that journey.
So great. So, I think the answer I just gave that talked about education and research actually nicely dovetails with this. So a fact about my career is that the day I became an associate professor with tenure was the day I became an associate dean. So those two things happened literally on the same day. I was working on as an assistant professor, trying to earn tenure, working in machine learning, and teaching, doing all of the service, all the things that you do in order to earn tenure. And along the way was this sort of semi-crisis point about what does it mean to bring people in? How do we think about undergraduate education? I started doing that as an assistant professor, learned a few tricks about how to deal with full professors, and we were able to create that. And one of the things that came out of that was sort of realization on my part that in order to see it through, I needed to put more time and energy into actually executing on it. And my dean at the time saw that as well. He did a national search for someone as a associate dean for undergraduate education. I did not apply for that search, but at the end of it, I got sort of brought in to think about it, and I was offered the position. And July 1st, I was an associate professor with tenure and an associate dean for undergraduate education. And that sort of kept going. I don't recommend that. Like, that's not a thing that people going through the normal state of affairs should do, but it did sort of work out for me. 3 years later, I went up for full professor and got it. And on the day I became a full professor, I became senior associate dean. So I had moved from focusing on undergraduate education specifically to more broadly academic affairs and thinking about, and in the context of a growing college, is a college of computing, right? And this is at a time where there weren't as many colleges, freestanding colleges of computing as there are now, sort of trying to think about the educational growth and the organizational growth happening at the same time. And so mostly that was focused on the academic enterprise, did more and more of that, and eventually became an executive associate dean. Should probably ask me what that means. And it just sort of grew over the years. All of it, though, was driven by a kind of fundamental belief that the research side and the, let's call it the educational side, combined through service, was something that was necessary to build, to have the kind of impact that I might want to have in academia. I had spent time before I became a professor. I was an undergrad at Georgia Tech. I went on to grad school out in Boston, very, very, very cold Boston, and went to Bell Labs for 4 years at the end of that, and understood what did it mean to do research in industry and in an organization that was doing basic research at the time. At that point, it was AT&T Labs. And I took that with me, that you can do multiple things, and that the organization and the way that you set it up actually really mattered. That the way you put people in place and the way that you supported them or where you didn't support them made a huge difference in how productive they were able to be and how useful the environment and the culture was. And so I sort of always had that in mind as I went through my career in academia. So I kept doing that, was the executive associate dean. I stayed in that position for a while. And then when the opportunity arose, I applied to be the dean of the College of Computing, and I did that. And I did that for 4 years. I loved every single minute of it. Being a dean is, in some ways, the best academic administrative job on any campus. And after 22 years and a month, I left Georgia Tech and came here to UW Madison as its provost, which I've been doing now for, 15 months and 4 winters, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. In addition to just the change in position, there's also readjusting to being in a cold climate again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, as you said, you kind of made this trajectory throughout it, and I'm really curious as to like what challenges or what were some of the pivotal moments that you faced as like pivoting, or maybe not pivoting, might not be the right word, but kind of shifting over to this leadership role while also maintaining like an active research agenda and being active in the academic community as well, from a research side.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question because there's sort of 2 ways to take it. So let me try to take it both ways. I think there's a kind of fundamental question we all have to ask ourselves, which is, why are we doing this? Like, why do we care about doing any of this? Why are we going into academia? Why are we doing research? And I think for me, and I think for actually everyone, it's about impact. But let's kind of think about what impact actually is. So the way I think about it a lot is, the truth is, it's about a kind of immortality, right? So, when I was young, for me, immortality really sort of meant living forever. And I kind of imagined that's what was going to happen. And, every year that I get older, my lower back makes it clear and clear to me that isn't going to happen. And you start thinking about, well, how am I changing the world, and how do I want to express my immortality through the way that I change the world? And when you get to that point, you start realizing that what immortality really is, what impact really is, doing something where your great-grandchildren know your name, right? That you have an impact, you're a rock in a lake and the ripples go out and those ripples keep touching and they keep touching and they live far beyond the time that you are here or doing the work that you do. And so when you think about it that way, that the point is to have changed the world, to have mattered, and to hopefully to have made it better as a part of that process, you start asking, well, what's the best way I can have impact? And for a lot of people, it's doing bigger, better research. For a lot of people, it's helping someone who's in need. There are lots of ways that you can have that impact. But for me, I found myself asking a simple question. Talked to lots of people who are going down this path, and why did you do it? And And no matter what story they told me, it sort of felt like it was the same story, which is, I've published 100 papers. I've done work that I'm proud of, some work that I think is making a difference, other people have built on. And so now I have to decide whether I'm doing another 100 papers or whether I'm going to do something else. And I think any answer to that question is a good one. But for me, it's time to do something else. I'm living in these sort of parallel worlds. I'm maintaining my research, but I'm feeling like I'm having this other kind of impact here. I'm shaping things. I am changing the trajectory of a particular place I happen to be in, and I can do more that way. So I started doing more and more of that without giving up this as best as I could. So I'm trying to do both. And so the story I tell myself, the way that I think about it from week to week and month to month and year to year is, how am I having the kind of impact that I want to have that will matter long after I retire and I stop doing what I'm doing. I also think there's another way to think about your question, which is it's about moments of challenge and crisis. It's about, these pivotal moments, as you say. And for me, the pivotal moment was the realization I was interested in doing a little different, even though it was a trade-off for me. It meant walking away from some things, walking towards something else. But it was also sort of the nature of computing and what was happening in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. And what was happening is that the field itself, what it is that we all do, was facing its own series of pivotal moments. There was the moment at the beginning that was about people leaving the field. There's a moment of colleges of computing being created. There was a moment of suddenly having this kind of impact that we were having in the world as people were beginning to adopt it. And through that adoption, change what computing meant. There was a sort of crisis, a sort of pivotal moment around creating these structures and trying to make them work. There was this crisis and pivotal moment around the need to meet demand in a way that was sort of physically impossible to do without doing something, not just nonlinear, but discontinuous. Like, what do we sort of do that? And to me, what the field has done, and when you look back at some of the things that various people have been able to do, various institutions have been able to do, it's responding to these pivotal moments. It's creating online education and touching 12,000 people at a time instead of 400 people at a time. It's creating new degree programs that allow people to bring to computing and change it by walking down one path or the other. It's ignoring the questions about what is really computer science, and instead thinking broadly about what computing might mean and how you bring people into it. It's the realization that we have to figure out how to be not just a thriving major, but a service unit. These things are all crises. They're questions. They're pivotal moments where if you answer them the wrong way, you head off into irrelevancy, or at the very least, you pay a massive opportunity cost. But if you answer them the right way, or at least you move in the direction that is right, then you can change everything, right? I mean, so, you asked me about my research. I do machine learning, right? I think of it as it's really just computing in a particular way, but I think about machine learning. And if you think about the people who do AI, the people who do machine learning, we have been spending the last 60 years trying to convince people that what we do is important. And it turns out that we're right. And now we're in a moment where we have to deal with the consequences of having been right. And so for me, this is a pivotal moment. It's a series of pivotal moments. And the question is just, how do you best as an individual rise up to those moments? I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I think it is very insightful. And hearing you talk, it kind of makes me see that, taking these leadership roles is really like, if I think of like as a researcher, when you're leading a lab, potentially you're setting the research agenda, but you're also supporting people in their own way. It seems like in that way, it's kind of like a natural thing, right? Where you're kind of setting a vision for what the educational system or what your department should be focusing on, might be doing, in the same way that you might be guiding students to kind of tackle problems or find new directions. And so I think in that case, I mean, that does make a lot of sense to me as like a PhD student coming from like really focusing on developing those skills. But I am curious, I think leadership in general can mean so many different things. And so what were some of the things like leadership skills that like maybe transfer over from being an academic or from having this kind of PhD education, or things that you really had to work on to really develop to fit those new roles that you were taking on?
Most of it was about problem solving, right? It's about thinking about problems, thinking about what it is you're actually trying to accomplish, understanding what it means to do success, and taking those things toward it. But if you think about, your journey, like where you are, you're a PhD student, right? And when you're a student, right, you're down there, you're digging into the trenches. You're doing work, and in the back of your head, you're thinking, the advisors, I'm doing all the real work. The advisor's taking all the credit, and and that's fine because I'm going to get out in the world and it'll be good. Well, one day you become an advisor, and now you're an advisor. That's the point at which you realize that actually you're doing all the hard work, and you're training and you're supporting these students who are doing what actually is a third of what the real work is, but you are further away from that work, which is sad. But you are multiplying your efforts by supporting people, and giving them the skills that they need, and that's great, and that's sort of the trade-off. And then you become a department chair or a dean or an associate dean. And when you get there, you realize that actually you're doing all the interesting work and the professors are actually doing the stuff that's not so interesting. And wherever it is you are in the hierarchy, that's where it feels like it's interesting. And the people below are doing things that you used to do, you used to enjoy, but this is sort of where it's at and where you can have the impact. And the people above you, I don't know what they're doing until you get there. Then you begin to see it at every single level as you convince yourself that you're doing the work and other people either stealing your credit or doing the uninteresting stuff. What you really actually see is that you're having a broader and broader and broader impact, right?
Yeah.
And you're further and further away from the decisions that are being made on the ground, which means a couple of things. It means that the abstraction, and we're computationalists, so we think in terms of abstraction, it's all the same. It's turtles all the way down, as they say, right? No matter where you are, the same set of skills that allow you to see problems, to listen to the world, whether that's data or it's human beings or whatever, are the same. There are different levels of abstraction. There are different groups of people. They're slightly different questions, but it's sort of the same, right? And you just have to figure that out and figure out how it applies in the context and the situation. And you have to remember that what credit means, what it means to have an impact, what it means to have done it yourself, sort of changes. As you move up, you're working through, you're supporting others to do the things that they want to do. And that has to be satisfying for you. And the satisfying for you is writing the line of code that generated the thing that, created the piece of data that allowed you to find the result that lets you write the paper, right? That's important. Or you're at the level where you think of the idea that helps the student to actually write a decent introduction and a conclusion, understand what the actual impact of their work is, opposed to the specific piece of code that they write. Or you're sitting at the level of realizing the actual impact that you can have is in the hiring that you do and setting the actual strategic direction for the unit that you're in charge of. That is the impact that allows the person to do the next level thing, which allows them to do the next level thing. And as you keep going, it's all about seeing what the problems are, making decisions, setting strategy, direction, and then empowering the people below you. And the details change, but it's really all the same set of questions over and over again. They just, get differently or more interesting as you go along.
Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on something that I was going to ask you next, and it's really about the role of mentorship, right? And I think you kind of already touched on that, as like how that changes at the different stages, like whether you're advising PhD students or like hiring new faculty. And so I wanted to ask you, what role did mentorship play in your academic and professional development?
I mean, it did everything, right? It's like asking me what friendship did. It's other people listening to you, other people supporting you, people you can talk to, people who provide the critical mass that you might not have where you happen to be, right? I mean, I came up in this world at a time, in this field, at a time where there weren't a lot of people who looked like me. I'm the first Black provost at UW Madison. I was the first Black dean, actually, any college of computing in R1, I'm pretty sure. I was the first Black assistant professor at Georgia Tech, associate professor at Georgia Tech, professor at Georgia Tech, associate dean at Georgia Tech, and so on, right? And you have to find mentors who have your experience, mentors who don't have the same experiences you have. You have to find critical mass and a support network somewhere, somehow, and the mentorship is that. And it gives you a place to bounce off of. Before we started doing this, you were listening to Valerie and me talk to one another, and going back to 1992, which is apparently before you were born. It's not a thing that I enjoy hearing. And that's where we met. She was a grown up and I was a grad student. And that relationship hasn't stopped since then, right? We're still working together. I've learned things. She's been a mentor for me. I see off on the side over here on the Zoom call with the list of people, Roscoe Giles, right? He was there too, right? And he influenced the things that I did. He listened to questions that I had. He gave me advice. and hey, Roscoe, and, change the direction of my life. So mentorship is at the core of everything. And for me as a receiver of the mentorship, but as you move through life, what becomes important is you're doing the mentoring, you're doing the supporting, you're kind of um, trying to pass along whatever experiences and wisdom that you have so that people can take from it what they will, and move forward. I will add just kind of a thing that I do think is important. You asked me about mentorship, and that's crucial. I think we all understand how it's important, but it is also just as important to understand the role that mentorship does and does not play in your own professional development. So many of you will be familiar with this distinction, but we often talk about mentorship, but there's also other kinds of ships, and probably the one that's most important is sponsorship, right? So mentors listen to you, right? Sponsors talk about it, right?
Mhm.
Some very important sense, mentors have no stake in what you do. I can tell you, I can give you advice, I can listen to you. That's all important. And when I give you a piece of advice and you just choose to ignore it, it's fine. It doesn't actually reflect on me. Neither your success nor your failures reflect on me personally, right? Because there's not the investment is sort of my own internal investment. It's not an investment in my reputation. But a sponsor is someone who talks about you, puts their reputation on the line. They go out in the world and they say, I believe that you should give Daniel this chance. I believe that put him on this program review panel, or give him a chance to do a talk, or take a chance at having a TA, or writing this paper, or whatever it is. And then you're putting your reputation on the line. So it becomes very important. And as you move through life and you have sort of more and more spheres of influence, and you have more levers to pull, you have a greater ability to do that, but also the stakes become higher and higher. And so there's a kind of inflation of those two things that you can have, because of course you can be a mentor and a sponsor, and of course you can do both of those things. But I don't know what the data are in 2024, but if you go back 5 or 10 years and you look at the data about mentors, what you discover is that people from sort of underrepresented groups, women, underrepresented minorities, have about twice as many mentors as their white male counterparts, for example, but they have about half as many sponsors. And that's more mentors is good, more sponsors is good. And importantly, it doesn't matter how far along you go, no matter what you do, how you accomplish, in whatever way you want to measure it, you still have to have sponsors. You still have to have people who are willing to put their reputation on the line to support you, or to tell others that yes, in fact, this person is worth having around. This person will make a difference. That difference will be positive. So I appreciate the question about mentorship. It is important. It is very important. It is difficult to navigate through without mentors and without people you can talk to honestly and who can talk to you honestly. But the distinction between mentorship and sponsorship really matters.
I mean, I think that's a really critical thing. And, it's tough already finding mentors as like, whether it's like if you're an underrepresented minority, as like a Latino, first gen, whatever it may be that you're in your field, it feels like it's difficult to find mentorship, but it might even be more difficult to find people who have the capital, really, right, to kind of throw around, especially, I think like trying to address some of these things through the LEAP Alliance and through some of the work. Hopefully we'll address some of that, but I think that's a really key distinction. And as a PhD student, or as the like early career researchers, I think that's like something to keep in mind. And so I'm wondering, like, for you, how did those relationships change? Were you kind of pretty explicit early on about kind of what guidance you wanted, what kind of ship you needed from your networks?
I wasn't as explicit about it as perhaps I could have been, because I don't think I had really internalized those distinctions, and I hadn't really thought about what it meant. It is very obvious to me that there were many sponsors behind the scenes, because people would ask me to do things that they had absolutely no reason to ask me to do. And, I don't know who told them. I don't know who said this. I have, suspicions here and there. But there were clearly sponsors. There were clearly people who were saying, Charles is worth talking to about this, do that, ask him this, support him in this way. So I know that whatever else was going on when I was a young grad student, for example, opportunities happened because others decided that they were willing to put some of their personal reputation on the line. As time went on, I began to understand that distinction, in part because I was then being asked to do similar things. I sought those things out, not as, hey, will you sponsor me? I need this, not at least not directly, but just being a part of the network and asking people for advice and asking people if they could point me in the right direction or connect me with the right person. And it becomes a kind of sponsorship. I think it's for me, and maybe it's my Southern upbringing. It's less about the explicit asking of it than it is the explicit taking advantage of it, right? Because people are offering this to you. I mean, all of us want to, reproduce in some sense, right? We want to find other people and help them and support them. And, if they're like us, whatever like us means, if they're interested in the things we're interested in, or we think that they can make a difference. And so recognize those things and celebrate them when they happen. And a lot of them will just kind of come along. And if you feel like you need to ask the question explicitly, ask the question explicitly. The worst thing that'll happen is if someone say, no, I'm not writing that letter of recommendation. I mean, every time you ask someone for a letter of recommendation, that's what you're doing. Every time you ask your advisor to support you to go somewhere, that's what you're doing. You're already asking these questions, and just recognizing that is what you're doing. A thing that, can help you, but also that what you're asking the other person to do, you're asking them to put their reputation on the line when they let you submit a paper, when they, let you give a talk, when I use let here, but I trust you know what I mean. You have earned the paper, you have earned the right to give the talk, but a lot of energy and effort goes into making certain that you have the sort of support you need so that you will do well on the other side of that as you develop the skills and experiences that you're going to need to succeed.
Yeah. I think that kind of tailors into another point that I have here is, and you kind of have already done this, but what specific advice do you have for like early career researchers, especially those from underrepresented minorities who kind of aspire to leadership positions, but may be concerned about maintaining their own research focus, or just might even be dealing with things like imposter syndrome as you kind of go through the leadership ladder and stuff. So what kind of advice do you have to share on that?
I think it's the same thing as advice I would give someone for powering through a PhD. And what's the problem with the PhD? The problem with the PhD, so it's amazing, we're all doing it. Many people on this call have them, but you don't need one, right? Like if you've got a bachelor's degree or a master's degree and you're heading off to get a job, you can get a job now, right? In fact, there's some opportunity cost to taking the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years that it'll take to get the PhD, which means that at some point you're going to hit a wall, maybe a thin wall or maybe a thick wall. And what's going to get you through that wall is not the promise I've got a PhD on the other end and therefore I'm going to be rich, right? What's going to get you through is passion, right? That you actually believe that this is something worth doing. You want to do it. And that is the thing that's going to get you through the third experiment not working and you've got a deadline, or you've got to once again do some kind of proposal or qualifier and it's all very irritating. That's what's going to get you through, right? And so the advice I have is you identify the passion that you have so that it is the thing that gets you through. But it's easy to misunderstand that. The way you can misunderstand that is say, well, I'm going to do the things that I'm passionate about and not do the things I'm not passionate about. But that's not how it works. The way I motivate myself to do the things I don't want to do is by realizing that I have to do those things so that I can succeed at the things that I do want to do, right? So you don't use your passion as an excuse not to do something, a way to say no or to avoid something. You use it as an excuse and a motivation to do the thing that you might not otherwise do, because it will better prepare you so that you can do the thing that you want to do, and the thing that you have passion for, and that's going to allow you to have the impact that you want to have. And that's true whether it's taking Calc 2, which you don't want to, or Physics 2 in my case, because you have to do it. You have to do well because you need to do that so that you can get the grade, so that you can do well in the next thing, so that you can get the GPA and have the experience that's going to get you into grad school. And then you're going to do this other thing you don't want to do because you need that, because presumably it develops a skill, it lets you meet a person you wouldn't have met. It allows you to get through because the qualifiers are a thing you have to do so that you can do the dissertation and the energy that you do the work that you want to do, so that you can be the professor or the researcher, so that all of these things are necessary to do the next thing. So your passion has to motivate you to get you through the hard times. And some of the hard times are doing the things that you don't want to do, but you have to do in order to do them. Yeah. I make that sound easy. It's not easy, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Sometimes like it's not going to be all like rainbows and paper acceptances and everything, right? There's a lot of grunt work that needs to get done for you to get those good results, or just do something even else that might not be research. And that kind of makes me think of like, well, how have you found a sustainable work-life balance, or what has been your kind of relationship to the work-life balance through your career?
Yeah, well, I mean, uh, I've got two answers to that. Do you want the one that makes you feel good or the one that makes you feel less good? Which one first?
Let's do less good first.
Okay. Um, I sleep a little less, right? There's just a lot to do. I there are things I want to do and there are things I need to do, and I have to do both of them. So I do both of them. I am sure that I've gone on fewer vacations than I should. I'm sure that I've spent less time doing some things that I would enjoy because that's what it's going to take to do the next thing that I want to take. Do I have the life work balance that everyone that many people aspire to? Probably not. On the other hand, I do love what I do. Like I genuinely love what I do. So it doesn't feel like a chore. And in some ways, that's a choice, right? I choose to do the thing that I want to do and I choose to be fulfilled by it. And that allows me to feel a sense of balance. So that's just kind of the truth. I sleep 6 hours instead of 7, 7 hours instead of 8. And that adds up over 55 years. Now, the good news is that I have found the things that I need in order to feel good about the things that I do. So I have, as of what's today? Thursday. I have, as of yesterday, 22,207 comic books. I enjoy collecting them. I enjoy reading them. They bring me a great deal of pleasure. I play racquetball when I'm not traveling every Tuesday morning, every Tuesday evening, every Thursday morning, every Thursday evening, some Fridays, most Saturday mornings, most Sunday mornings. I play racquetball and I play ultimate frisbees most Saturdays and Sundays. And that lets me burn energy and be happy. When I get home, I get on the sofa and I turn on my Apple TV and I watch movies and TV shows. I read trash books when I fly. And these are all simple pleasures. They make me happy. And that's just me as an individual. That's not what I do with my family. That's not what I do watching my children grow up. Right. And you can find those things that give you happiness, that allow you to make it through for the next day, for the meeting you have to get up in the morning to do, to deal with an investigation of somebody about something. Right? And for me, that's the work-life balance that I've been able to achieve. And whether I've achieved it or not, I think depends a lot upon who you ask.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I also imagine it's not something that has been static or consistent throughout. Maybe there's like ups and downs, but I think that like makes me appreciate the fact that you're taking this time out to talk to me, and to really have this webinar even more, because I know there's probably like a long queue of things that you have to attend to. So I do really appreciate that. And I think the last question before I kind of open it up to the audience to field their own questions, which I'm sure they're really eager to do. I was just wondering, what specific advice do you have, or what are some ways that PhD students and early career researchers could develop and grow those leadership skills?
You take advantage of the opportunities for leadership that are in front of you. This is actually a work-life balance question, right? So somebody asks you to sit on a committee, like, why? You're going to pay me? The answer is no. What am I getting out of it? Like, is it a thing I want to do? Will I develop a skill out of it? Will I learn something I wouldn't have learned before? And perhaps you discover that you're good at it. You discover you enjoy it, or whatever. Those are leadership skill opportunities, right? That urge you have to start, a seminar with other students that are just for students. That's an opportunity to build something. That's a leadership opportunity. There's lots of ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be just inside your work, but the chance to lead others and develop the skills to figure out what that means. It means listening. It means sometimes talking. It means understanding what it means to accomplish a goal. These things kind of develop over time, and you can only get it through practice. You can only get it through practice, right? You have to do it enough in order to develop the muscles. I mean, frankly, to develop the taste of what it means to sort of have the impact and do the thing, and to know that you're doing it well. So if there are people who are thinking about how to do that, I recommend taking on some leadership roles, something you have some passion about, something that, may help you because you've got things you have to do, but will give you the opportunity to learn how things are really done. And the thing that I'll add to that, and this is, I think, particularly for us, right? All of us have gigantic egos because we have to, because you actually believe that you can invent something that no one else has ever invented or discover something no one else has ever discovered and get a PhD. What enormous hubris that is, right? Like you really believe you can why do you think you can do this? Nobody else has discovered the thing that you're about to discover. Nobody else has had the idea that you're about to have, or at least seen it through fruition, as far as you know. So why do you think you can do that? So you already come into this with an enormous amount of ego and belief in yourself, even if you don't think about it that way. You do. And that is going to carry you through. And you need to have that belief that you can do these things that perhaps seem impossible to others. But another thing that you have to do is you have to bring with you humility. And that humility is not false humility, right? It's not pretending that you're not good at something that you're good at or that you don't know something that you do. It's the humility that comes from understanding that you don't necessarily know the answer, even though you know you're capable of learning it. That this thing that looks easy to you from the outside is probably quite hard, and that it is worth your time to go into that with that mindset so that you can learn the things that you need to learn. In academia in particular, we're all we select for prima donnas, myself included. We select for people who think that they could learn anything, and sometimes they confuse that with having learned everything. So yeah, I could do that job, but that doesn't mean I can do that job because I didn't do that. I haven't had the experience. I haven't done the preparation. And so realizing that every problem is harder than it seems and you have something to learn, and everything, no matter how mundane it is, gives you an opportunity to develop a skill or to learn better is, to me, the kind of fundamental humility you have to bring to anything that's put in front of you. And that's really the only way that you learn, because otherwise you miss all the opportunities that are going by while you're busy convincing yourself it's not important or it's not that hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, there's so many questions I could follow up from that, but I do want to give the audience an opportunity now to ask questions of Dr. Isbell as well. So if you're in, you could either unmute yourself and ask the question, or put it in the chat as well, and I can kind of make sure that I ask that question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is this Chase?
Yes, yes. Dr. Isbell, I just want to say thank you so much. I met you years and years ago when I was I returned back to school to go to Georgia State and finish my degree in computer science. And I was looking at Georgia State, and I mean, not Georgia State. I was looking at Georgia Tech, transitioning from Georgia State to Georgia Tech. And you were part of the focus group, and you came and you spoke to us, and you really touched me. And I just want you to know that after we talked, I ended up going to CMU, getting my master's, and I'm currently doing a PhD. And part of that was because you were inspiration when I found out about you were doing machine learning and AI before it became popular. And I'm like, wait a minute, what a trailblazer. So anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for being the pioneer that you've been.
I certainly appreciate that. I will say one thing about having done this for 30 something years. We're in a moment now, you mentioned this earlier, we're in a moment now where everyone's doing AI, and it's deeply frustrating to me. They have all these mechanical engineers tell me, oh, I've been doing AI since the 1970s. No, you haven't. But okay, it's like being a fan of a small indie band that has now gone really big, and everyone's talking about and you're like, no, I was with them when they were just, going from club to club and they only had 6 people. I was there in the audience supporting them, and I'll be there when their number 3 album falls off the cliff. But thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. That's your answer to your question about why you try to do these things and have these conversations, because you touch someone hears what you say, maybe they think you're an idiot and they do something else, or maybe they think what you said is good and they do that. But either way, you can have an impact on where they go. I think Valerie has her hand up.
Yes, I do. So thank you, Dr. Isbell. Enjoyed what you had to say. But I want to know, as a provost, what do you do on a daily basis? You hear the term provost, and it took me a little while being in academia before I realized that's vice president, I think, of the university. But if you could elaborate too on what is it you do as a provost? Because I didn't know until I got into academia after a few years. So,
Okay, well, I'm happy to answer that question because, I sit around and I say I'm a provost, and what actually happens is people then nod politely, and I'm like, they don't know what I do. It sounds kind of fancy, so they think they have to be polite, but yes, so let me tell you a little bit about it. So, the first thing you have to know, and this is the thing that even after I became a provost, took me a while to really kind of grasp, is I have two titles. I am the Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs and the Provost. In other places, it's Vice President of Academic Affairs or Senior Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost. And the reason there are two titles here, I mean, there's a history there, but I think it's useful to think about it. It's two jobs. So as Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, I am the Chief Academic Officer for the university. So all academic enterprises sort of report up through me. So every dean of every college, of every school reports to me. All of the stuff that supports the things that are in the colleges or the schools or the departments reports up to me, and I'm responsible for all of that. I have, in addition to the deans, a series of vice provosts and directors. So the vice provost of faculty affairs reports up to me. There's a senior vice provost over academic affairs. In the case of UW Madison, the CIO reports directly to me. The people who gather all the data to support the academic enterprise report directly to me. And there are little changes here to there, here and there at different universities, but basically the academic enterprise reports up through the provost in one way or the other, that is, in the role of vice chancellor or vice president for academic affairs. I think that's the thing that's kind of easiest to think about. It's the stuff you think of as the academics. In theory, I run that. The provost job is a little different. As the provost, I am and it's sort of terrible to say it this way, but I'm talking to you guys, so I'm just going to tell you what it is. As provost, I am first among equals with the vice chancellors or vice presidents, and I am the chief strategic partner to the chancellor or the president. Any provost is. So there's the president or the chancellor, there's the provost. And that's sort of, as you said, Valerie, the vice president of the university. So this is the number two job in the university. And it both oversees a portfolio on the one hand, but also is meant to be strategic and supporting the entire university, working directly with the president or the chancellor. In this case, it's a chancellor. And that means that I ask a lot of questions about strategic planning. We're in the middle of completely rethinking our budget approach, and I am overseeing that. There's all of these things that kind of happen, and that sort of lands on the shoulders and in the lap of the provost. So that's what the provost does. Another way of thinking about it is provost, actually, the original meaning of provost was warden. This is the person who's over the asylum, which I think you appreciate, Valerie.
yes. So, can I ask one more question too?
Please.
Yes. When you started as an assistant professor at Georgia Tech, did you have your mind set on one day becoming a provost?
Well, first off, I didn't know what a provost was, so
I know.
I mean, I remember the day I realized that the provost was important was the day that I realized the provost was the last person who was going to sign up on my tenure case, at which point I suddenly thought maybe I should know what a provost does. I had no thoughts about any of this. I mean, so when I was 8.5 years old, actually before then, I was about 8 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a professor in computer science. I didn't know what any of that meant, but I did know that that's what I wanted. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. My teachers told me, no, go be a professor. I said, okay. I knew I was into computers and computer science, so I said, okay. And I did that, and I sort of walked through it. And eventually that's kind of what happened. The details changed along the way. I sharpened what it was, but became an assistant professor eventually, and sort of kept going through. The thing that I did know, not knowing what a provost was, is that I wanted to somehow be a part of making higher education better, for some definition of better. I believed then, though I couldn't have articulated it that well, and I believe now that higher ed is in the middle of a crisis. It has been for decades, that at least dates back to the 1980s of what does it mean to be a higher educational institution. Given what it's done for me and how it changed the potential trajectory of my life, it seems that the very least I could do is think about how to make it a better place so that I can change the directories of others. as I moved through the world, it became clear to me that there were ways of doing that. When I became an associate professor and suddenly stopped worrying about tenure, when I started becoming an associate dean and did this, and then I could see, well, computing is central to this, and so I want to try to understand what it means to be a part of the conversation around what computing is and what it can be. And then you find yourself saying, well, computing is central and all, but the truth is you've got these large elite public research universities that have the potential to impact big, huge problems. So we should be thinking about that. And in order to do that, I need to be able to talk to the med school and to the vet med and to law. And I need to bring all these things together and be a part of the conversation at that level. And then suddenly you realize you need to be a provost. And so I didn't know I wanted to be a provost, but I did know there was a certain kind of conversation I wanted to be a part of and change I wanted to be a part of. And as the years went by, I came to understand the different paths for being a part of that conversation. And this is one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Chris has his hand up.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah. I have a question. You started to answer, I think to some extent you may have already answered this in bits and pieces, but well, actually, first I want to say you missed a real opportunity there. I'm looking in the background, and you can say the job of a provost is to dig ditches. You just get to do it with a golden shovel.
There's a picture over there that you can't see. When I first came in, I changed all the artwork, and it's a picture of a firefighter with an axe surrounded by smoke, and it's got a name, but I refer to it as what a provost does all day, which is put out fires without benefit of water.
I was just looking at your background. You've got a golden shovel sitting there.
Yep, my first ever groundbreaking.
So, but now my question is, I'm seeing a lot more students getting their PhD and looking towards industry as their first choice, as their what they really want to do. You moved from having spent time at Bell Labs, which is, I don't know if industry is the right word for it. It's a kind of a unique place, but it's why academia as the right place to be, as opposed to taking an industry position?
So it's a great question, and I appreciate it. There is an answer which says you should do whatever thing motivates you and where your passion is. But having said that, it's a lifestyle choice. It's a pretty significant lifestyle choice, right? In academia, you're being asked to think constantly about education and educating people, right? They're always going to be, at the undergraduate level, certainly, they're always going to be 17 to 22, and they're just going to keep cycling through. You're being asked to think about things across a variety of disciplines with the goal, particularly if you're at a large research university like this one, with the goal of doing the basic work that sets people up to solve the problems. You're asked, even though you don't always think about it this way, to look not just 6 months down the line or a year down the line, but really to look in terms of decades. And that sort of lifestyle of educating, being in that environment that's constantly churning and isn't worried about what's happening in the next 6 months, is fundamentally different from living in the world where you are doing great work, where you have all kinds of resources, but there's a certain kind of different bottom line. And both of those things can be fulfilling. But for me, being here allows me to be a part of a certain kind of conversation that's harder to be in industry in general, even industry that's research focused. Bell Labs is gone. We don't have Bell Labs anymore. We have great places, but it's just a different lifestyle altogether. Jeff Forbes just turned on his camera, and Jeff has made a similar kind of decision, right? He went into academia, he focused on teaching as well as research, and now he's at NSF. And being at NSF is a different kind of lifestyle. You're a part of government. You're doing service. You're worried about you do the thing. I mean, the point of government is to do the thing that is not profitable and does not make a difference in that sense in the next year, but is a payoff for 20 years down the line. That's why you go into government. That's why you're at a place like NSF. You don't do the work yourself every day. You do, and you do work. But the specific work you're figuring out how to fund the people or support the people who are going to make a difference through this particular mechanism. Not much different from the way that I think about academia and what excites me about being a part of it. It is a different mode. but it is another lifestyle, and can be a very fulfilling lifestyle. And Jeff purposely made that decision, so I know it was a lifestyle that he chose. And I think, again, for a lot of these questions that we ask ourselves, why this and why that, it's about understanding where your passion is and how you're going to want to make the difference. Go into industry, produce that product, release it out in the world, and see it touch 10,000 people. And that's motivating. Go out in the world and educate 12,000 people a semester who otherwise wouldn't have gotten an education, and change it that way. Or go out in the world and figure out how to fund broadening participation in computing, and bringing together the set of people and convening them so that you can have a certain kind of impact. And all of those are equally valid, but they are different, and they're different both day to day and in the way that you measure success. And so figuring out what it is that you want to do at that level helps you to guide which of the multiple paths you could take that you should. And speaking of, it looks like Jeff has a hand.
Thank you for the talk, Charles.
Dr. Forbes.
So being a provost who does work in machine learning is different than being a provost who was an English professor, presumably, in that keeping up with your field might move a little faster. Not to impugn English professors, but I don't know if there are that many in the room. So how do you do it? Like how are you able to keep up with your field? Because I think this applies to many of us if we go work at NSF or go work in industry. Like, how are you able to keep on task when you don't have time to spend on the research as much anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it's work-life balance in a different form, right? It's an impossible thing for you to completely accomplish. The way that I've tried to do it is in sort of three ways. One, I still have a PhD student. You can't see this because it's up here, the pictures, but I have all of my PhD students have graduated up here on a wall. They're all wearing Bootsy Collins hats and glasses, Star Child glasses, because my research group's called P-Funk, and that's sort of the thing we do. I still have a student, and I still have a postdoc. And through that, I'm able to, have an excuse to kind of stay engaged at that level through other people more than anything else. That's one way. The other way is I changed the question that I was asking myself, right? So rather than trying to figure out on my own the right way to get 3% speed up and data efficiency for my favorite machine learning algorithm, I started asking questions at the level closer to policy, at the level of opinion and influence. What does it mean to do responsible AI? What does that mean, right? There are people who are working on an algorithmic level. I can give you a theoretical definition of fairness and another theoretical definition of fairness, where we can talk about what does it mean to do responsible AI? What does it mean to do ethical AI? And we can ask those questions. And even if I'm not up to date on the 20,000th paper that got published today on Archive, which it's all but impossible to keep up with that anyway, I have had enough experience and I am talking to enough people that I can have something to say at that level. And so that level of abstraction, not much different from how we started this conversation about you're a grad student and you see the world this way, and then you become an advisor, and then you become a dean or a department chair, and you start seeing the level of abstraction change. And the third thing, which is tied into the second thing most of all, but is actually also tied into the first thing, is you stay engaged with groups of people who care about this. You become a part of being convened and in convening, and you keep yourself active and into the big issues that way. So, next, when NSF asks me to review something, I will say yes, at least,
really?
And at least 1 out of 10 times. I used to do it 8 out of 10 times. I have to say no a little bit more, but I try to say yes if I can. I try to be on a review committee for this. I try to stay up with what's going on as best I can given my constraints. And I make certain that whatever else is happening, I haven't said no every single day of the week for a year. And I say yes sometimes, and I probably sleep a little bit less, but I get to keep up that way. And that's sort of the best that you can do. Change what it means to be involved. Make certain you stay connected to the people who are involved at a different level, and make certain you're surrounded by a community of people who care about these problems so that you can keep up with the relevant things where you can have an impact and change. How was that, Jeff?
That was good.
Thank you. I mean, isn't that what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, anyway, we can talk about it some other time, but just it's also given the number of people who now do machine learning from so many different places, it is more challenging to figure out what's good and what's not than maybe it was before.
Honestly, it's the problem of our day, not just the machine learning, but in general. We have information overload and
Yeah.
right. I mean, we could talk about this for a whole nother hour.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Isbell. I mean, like you said, I'm sorry we couldn't get to every question on the chat as well, but I really want to thank Dr. Isbell for his time, for his guidance, and for his advice, and just for talking us through his journey through his academic and leadership positions. So again, I want to give you like a round of applause for everybody, virtual applause, for coming in, and thank you again so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Invite me back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Peace, everybody.
And
Bye, everyone.
thank you, Daniel, for serving as an excellent moderator.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. So I enjoyed it a lot.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.